Blessings, everyone. This is Chris Kendall from the rawadvantage.com, registered holistic nutritionist, raw food lifestyle coach, and raw chef. Today, I'm excited to share with you a fun and in-depth interview with my friend Glen Livingston Ph.D., top-selling author of Never Binge Again, as he gets into some of his top tips to help you never binge again. Let's get into it.
Baby, I like it raw. Raw Advantage likes it raw. Ooh, baby, I like it raw. Yeah, baby, I like it raw. Hey.
All right, guys, so I'm really excited to have my good friend Glen Livingston Ph.D. back on the show. Hey, Glen, how you doing, man?
Hey, I'm doing really well. Nice to be here.
So stoked to have you back. And if you guys haven't heard yet, I actually did an interview with Glen about 5 years ago where we went into a little bit of his story and into some of his learnings about helping people not to binge again. All right, Glen, so just for those who maybe haven't heard the first interview, who haven't heard of you before, let us know a little bit about yourself, your credentials, and how you got here.
So I'll give you some impressive credentials that really look good on paper.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you the most important thing about me to know is that I'm not just a psychologist that chose to work with eating disorders or helping people stop binge eating. I was a very serious binge eater myself. I was about 280 pounds at one point, and the doctors were telling me that I was going to die in my 30s because my triglycerides were over 1,000. Wow. And yeah, I just couldn't stop eating myself. I just couldn't. So everything I'm going to tell you is really hard-won personal experience, not something from research or just working with a lot of clients, although I have done both. So in terms of the spaghetti after my name, I've got a PhD in clinical psychology.
Yeah.
But my ex-wife, she traveled for business, so we didn't have kids, and she wasn't around during the week, so I had a lot of time. And rather than get myself in trouble, I developed a second career. So I did a lot of consulting for big food, big pharma, companies I'm not really proud of having worked for, many in the Fortune 500. I think I was on the wrong side of the war. I think that I was helping them in their quest to make food that wasn't really food seem like food.
Yeah.
And all these hyper palatable concentrations of starch and sugar and fat and oil and cytotoxins and
Pleasure trap stuff.
Pleasure trap stuff, yeah. And it all gets wrapped up in a package that's designed to fool your evolutionary senses. You know, like a really bright, diverse colored bar. Hello, Katie.
Hello, Katie.
A really bright, diverse colored bar. In nature, diverse, bright colors is supposed to represent like a big salad and a diversity of nutrients. You think of a big bowl of fruit with like apples and oranges, or like even some tubers like carrots or cabbage.
It's the mouth watering and the eyes light up. Yeah.
Yeah. But they were actually taking the vitamins and nutrients out of the bar to save money and put it into the packaging instead. And this is just one company. So I was on the wrong side of the war, but I learned a lot. And I learned that was relevant to me because it was part of convincing me that I wasn't diseased. There wasn't something wrong with me. I wasn't just an emotional eater, quote unquote. I was being targeted by billions of dollars of advertising money and scientific engineering, which is designed to hit your bliss point without making you feel satisfied, so that you go back for more and more and more. And that had nothing to do with the fact that my mama didn't love me enough when I was little, or that she kept a big bottle of chocolate Bosco syrup in the refrigerator for me so she wouldn't have to bother with me when she was too depressed or anxious herself.
The soother.
I'm sorry?
It's like the soother.
It was, the treats. Yeah. And I mean, part of what I'm going to tell you is that those connections are all there, but you can sever the link between, like rather than spending decades of my life like I did, trying to solve my emotional problems, figuring out why do I have a hole in my heart? And if I could fill that hole in my heart, maybe I won't keep trying to fill the hole in my stomach.
Yeah.
I think it was a misguided approach because, first of all, I don't think you can love yourself thin because the part of the brain that the food industry is targeting doesn't know love. They're targeting the reptilian brain. Yeah. And the reptilian brain looks at things in the environment and it says, do I eat it? Do I mate with it? Or do I kill it? It's
3-star options, hey?
It's like eat, mate, or kill. That's the
Hopefully not all at once.
Well, that sounds like a college game if there ever was one.
Or praying mantis.
But you think of that as the reptilian brain. Stop, that's funny. On top of it evolved the mammalian brain, which says, before I eat, mate, or kill that thing, what impact is that going to have on my tribe or my loved ones?
Yeah.
You know, I have to kind of delay that impulse and think about emotional attachments and things like that. And then on top of that's the neocortex that says, wait a minute, besides your tribe and your loved ones, what about your long-term goals? Mm-hmm. What about your long-term health and fitness? What about your contribution to society? What about your work? What about your art? What about your spirituality? What about your music? And these are like later periods in the evolutionary history of the brain. I'm talking about evolution. Some people say, well, I don't believe in evolution. I'm going to tell you that it doesn't really matter. You still can't love yourself then. It doesn't matter whether you accept this model or you think that God put it there. We know that it's there, right? It doesn't matter whether it revolved or not. We know it lines up like that. And so for me, my story is that for, about 30 years, because I was brought up in a family of 17 psychotherapists.
Wow.
Something.
Wow.
Yeah. You can feel sorry for me later.
No, it's amazing.
Well, it's both a blessing and a curse.
Yeah.
It's a blessing because it made me very soulful, but the best way I could describe the curse is that if something broke in our house, everybody knew how to ask it how it feels and nobody knew how to fix it. So I just didn't have any practical world skills. I was the most sensitive, compassionate, loving guy you could meet, but I am a very soulful person. But when it came to fixing the vacuum cleaner or taking out the garbage, I just didn't know what I was doing. I fixed that now over many years of therapy. But so I spent all those years trying to figure out what was wrong with me, quote unquote. Where was the hole in my heart coming from? And how could I nurture my inner wounded child back to health? Mm-hmm. And I learned a lot about myself during that time. I think that it made me a more compassionate person. I think it made me a more spiritual person. I think it enhanced my ability to connect to other people. But I binged my way all the way through.
Yeah.
I binged my way all the way through that. And sometimes a little better, sometimes a little worse. I went to the best psychologists and psychiatrists and Overeaters Anonymous. And I learned things. Mm-hmm. But it never really worked with the binging. Then I finally had this insight about the overwhelming forces in society aligned against our reptilian brains.
Yeah.
And I said, that has nothing to do with my personal psychology. And then I read a book by Jack Trimpey called Rational Recovery, and he works largely with alcoholics and drug addicts, the kind of black and white addictions you can quit wholeheartedly, as opposed to food where you have to take the lion out of the cage and walk it around the block a couple of times a day.
Yeah.
And he was talking about the bipartite nature of the brain, that there was the reptilian brain and then there was us.
Yeah.
And everything that we value, this is what I was showing you before, I think there are three pieces, not two, but everything that we value is really in the upper brain. Mm-hmm. Tribe and family and love and spirituality and music and art, that's really in the upper brain. But the fight or flight response, the feast or famine response, the primitive part of us that says just hand over the chocolate or nobody gets hurt and screw all of your long-term goals, that's in the reptilian brain. Yeah. And so I said, and this came from Jack Trimpey also, I said, this is really a game of dominance, not a game of nurturance. If I want to win this game, I have to dominate this bodily organ. Mm-hmm. Very much the same way that you dominate your bladder. I actually have to pee just a little bit right now, but I'm not going to go. I'm going to tell my bladder that it has to wait until the end of the interview. Yeah. Because I'm in charge. I'm doing something important with my friend Chris. Yeah. And I want to complete a good interview, and it's really not that bad. I'll be okay. Yeah. I would do the same thing with my testicles, right? Mm-hmm. If there was a very attractive person outside, I would not run up and kiss them. Yeah. I probably would never talk to them ever because I'm incredibly shy in person. but the point is that we have the power as human beings and the responsibility to dominate certain physical cravings. That's part of being a human in a civilized society. Yeah. And then if you think about an alpha wolf in a wolf pack, it's constantly being challenged for leadership. And that alpha wolf, when it's challenged for leadership, doesn't say, oh my goodness, someone needs a hug. right?
Most of them don't, that's for sure.
No, it growls and it snarls and goes, get back in line or I'll kill you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I started saying, well, this is not my inner wounded child. This is a very destructive part of myself. It's really my survival drive misdirected.
Yeah.
And it's misdirected by industry on purpose. Every time that I'm looking for love at the bottom of a bag or a box or a container, there's some fat cat in a white suit with a mustache is laughing all the way to the back.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that made me mad.
No.
I don't think that should be the case. I don't think the man should get to profit because of my misery.
No, for sure.
And so I started to turn that sense of shame into a sense of anger and outrage. And I started to, this is kind of an embarrassing part of it because I'm really a sophisticated psychologist and I did this 40,000 person study and I've been in the New York Times, the Los Angeles Times, and Crane's New York Business and blah, 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 blah. I've been in all kinds of fancy schmancy things. I had a lot of spaghetti after my name. But the way that I recovered, I can't believe I still say this publicly, but I decided there was a pig inside of me. I decided that my reptilian brain was going to be my pig.
Yeah.
More like a wild boar. And I wasn't vegan back then. I am now, but I wasn't vegan when I did this. So please forgive the use of the pig as the metaphor, but it works.
All in its time. And yeah, it totally does connect. It really does connect, because I mean, thinking about, not to throw you off your role, but, thinking about it being a reptile doesn't connect in the same way as, like uncontrollable overeating. Pig automatically just makes you think of that.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I call it a pig with a capital P is distinguished from real pigs in the world because real pigs are actually very sweet animals that are being tortured and need our help.
Yeah.
But anyway, this was my pig with a capital P, which wanted nothing but to eat pig slop. Yeah. And I would make a very clear, bright line so that I would know the difference between healthy food and pig slop.
Yeah.
And I decided it was totally up to me. I was tired of following this diet guru's protocol or that diet guru's protocol. It was going to be totally up to me. If it's going to be, it's up to me. No one was coming to the rescue. And one of my first rules was that I will never eat chocolate on a weekday again. Because my binge has always started with chocolate, right?
Yeah.
And so if I happen to be in Starbucks and there's a chocolate bar on the counter and there's this little voice inside me that says, you worked out hard enough. You're not going to gain any weight. Go ahead.
What can one little piece do? What can one little piece do?
Yeah. Start this no chocolate thing on the weekday, starting tomorrow. Yeah. And I would immediately then say, that's my pig squealing for pig slop.
Yeah.
I don't eat pig slop. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do. Chocolate on a Wednesday is over the line. Therefore, it's pig slop. I was never going to talk about this, Chris. This was a totally private thing.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just an experiment I did. It happened to be the one that worked.
Yeah.
For about 8 years, I kept a journal. I made all sorts of other rules. I realized you could make rules that added things, like I'll always drink 2 glasses of pure spring water in the morning. You can make conditional rules that said I'll only have pretzels at a Major League Baseball park.
Yeah.
You could say things that were unconditional. You could do whenever. So I basically came up with categories of things to define what my food plan would be and have very clear lines. And I didn't get better immediately. What happened immediately was I stopped thinking that I was diseased or abnormal. I stopped thinking that I was powerless over food.
Yeah.
I realized that it was my choice.
Yeah.
Every single bite was my choice. And it would wake me up at the moment of impulse and give me those extra microseconds that I needed to make the right choice if I wanted to.
Yeah.
As time went on, I kept a journal, me versus my pig.
Yeah.
And I would start to write down not just that it was pig slop and I should ignore it, which works sometimes, but I write down why the pig was wrong specifically. So if it said, it's just as easy to start tomorrow, well, it turns out if you look into neurological research and the way the brain learns, it's harder to start tomorrow than today. If you have a craving and you reinforce it by the principle of neuroplasticity, what fires together wires together. So you're actually deepening the addiction, and you're going to be in a deeper hole tomorrow. If you're in a hole, stop digging. Doug told me that. Doug Graham.
Yeah. Doug Graham's a great one. And then, I mean, it's the neuroplasticity of the mind, right? It's like digging a trench that just gets deeper and deeper, kind of like on a ski slope. Just you get into that because it's there, right?
Yeah, yeah. So the first thing you do is stop digging if you're in a hole, right? It'll actually be harder to start tomorrow. the only time you can ever eat healthy is now. You always use the present moment to be healthy.
Yeah.
And so those are like little sayings that I came up with in my journal that I repeat over and over to myself. And over 8 years, my pig had a lot of creative excuses, and I came up with a lot of creative ways to disempower it.
Yeah.
When I was getting divorced in 2015, which was right around when I met you, I was a minor partner in a publishing company. And the CEO in that company called me and said, Glenn, we need to publish our own book to prove that we know what we're doing so that we can attract better authors. And we need someone who will let us do, a couple of different marketing experiments, and will actually, there's a right way to market a book and a wrong way to market a book. And most people look for the short, easy way. But the right way is to contact all the best reviewers and develop a relationship with them and ask them what they think and have conversations with them. And he says, we need someone who will actually do that. So I was getting divorced. I wasn't really sure what I was going to do with my life. And I thought, why not? I've got this pig inside of me. I'll go tell people about it. So I wrote the book over that summer, and maybe in the fall a little bit. We published it in the fall. So I wrote it over the summer. And then I gave it to him to review. And he was 100 pounds overweight himself. And so he reads the book, and he calls me back 2 weeks later and says, Glenn, this is a great book. I got a pig inside of me too. Donuts are pig slop. I don't eat donuts. I don't let farm animals tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And he gets all excited about it, and he starts losing weight. And he's now thin. He's now lost, I think he's gotten to 100 pounds, maybe 96, something like that.
Yeah.
But over 2 years, one of the things I've learned above all else is that you got to do it slowly, because there seems to be this evolutionary mechanism that keeps us on the feast and famine cycle. Most overeaters are really good dieters.
Yeah.
So most overeaters have stories of having lost a lot of weight and gained it back a bunch of times. And I say, well, that's because you're on the feast and famine cycle. Your pig likes that. If you go through an environment where calories and nutrition are scarce, it only makes sense that your brain would say, as soon as they're available, you'd better hoard them. So
absolutely.
So the way I help people to lose weight is to keep a regular, reliable source of nutrition running through their body at all time. Ideally, it's fruit and greens. My book is diet agnostic, so
absolutely,
I let them eat what they want to eat. But
which is great too, because I mean that meets everyone where they're at, and then if they research you more, they might learn more about what you're doing, and go into your coaching programs. And I want to say too that one of the things I think is so great about your program and so great about the approach too is when somebody's down and out, when they're in that pit and that pig is squealing, well, it applies 110%, right? Like your rope's end and you're stressed out. Well, you still, don't listen to the pig, right? Whereas a lot of other approaches, when people are down and out, that's when, reality hits and their approach doesn't work as well, right? Because they're stressed out and they're like, screw it all. I can self-love myself tomorrow. And maybe they try and rationalize, but having the more kind of poignant line in the sand and being like, no, I don't do that, right? Like I think it just lends to being successful in more times in your life, right? Because I mean, it's in those hardest times you grow the most. And if you're in a hard time and you just put that line in the sand and say, I don't do that, then that becomes a very powerful habit.
Well, and then it's also knowing what to do at those moments.
Yeah.
The whole methodology is targeted at overcoming the case of the efforts. We call it the efforts. When the pig takes over and you had all these great plans, no matter what rules you made, and all of a sudden it says, screw it, you can start tomorrow, or one bite's not going to hurt, or you've started over so many times it doesn't matter. You're always going to be
a master at that. Hey, the pig's a master at just deflecting and figuring out excuses.
Yeah. So we have protocols for what people can do to overcome that. So.
And now too, you have multiple books on the subject. So your main book is Never Binge Again, and then you have some other ones. What are some other ones you'd like to mention and kind of go into some of the different protocols?
Well, the next book I wrote after Never Binge Again was called The Food Demon Interviews. And that was really a set of abstractions from actual coaching sessions that we did. And there are 11 of the best ones, I think, so people could see how this plays out in practice.
Mhm.
It sounds like a very harsh, weird thing to do.
Mhm.
Like people must be saying, well, why does Chris have this psychologist on who's got a pig inside of him? What's going on here? Um, it sounds like a really weird, harsh thing to do, but it's actually very compassionate and
Mhm.
life-giving, and it's self-esteem enhancing. At the end of the interview, I'll tell you where people could get some recordings of actual coaching sessions so you can see for yourself for free.
Absolutely. And the book is free, which is so amazing. You get the ebook for free. It's amazing.
The Kindle book, yeah.
Yeah, I love that, man. I mean, I think a lot of people can be helped by it. And even if someone asks that, to me, it's like, the more tools you can have in your toolkit, the better, right? And not every single approach works perfectly for everyone, but the more tools you have and the more you can implement them in times where it's needed, the more success people are going to have, right? So
I should say that people don't have to call it a pig. I called it a pig. I was getting divorced when I wrote the book. I was really mad at stuff.
yeah,
It was a place for my aggression. I published it then, and it really took off like that, and I'm known for that. So reply.
it lit the fire
That
for you, right?
wasn't very vegan of me, but if you don't kill them, what happens? I try the little soap dishes, and you get some of them, but they always come with several 100,000 of their neighbors.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What's the vegan solution for fruit flies? What do you do?
I just love them.
You just love them?
I know people could laugh about that, but I mean, there's obviously some solutions to keep it a little bit more under control. Like I keep my fruit that's ripe in cooler places, and the fruit flies don't really proliferate in the cooler places. Otherwise, you can put nets on them, or you can keep the fruit that has any break in the skin, because that's what they're going for. They're going for the vinegar rather than the sugar. So if there's a break in the skin, put that fruit in the fridge, and the stuff that doesn't have a break in the skin or any bruised spots is much less likely to bring up a bunch. But otherwise, I just look at them as little versions of me that just love fruit, and I'm like, oh, you're only here for a day. Go ahead.
Okay, that's funny. I actually bought 15 cases of bananas. I was doing a banana cleanse for a while.
15 cases at once?
I bought 15 cases, because I figured I was going to do it for 60 days.
Wow.
And I still got a couple over there, but that's why I had the fruit flies, because I ran out of space in the refrigerator. That's why that happened.
Well, Glenn, I got to just say right now, this is a proud parent moment, because I coached you at the raw food diet.
You did. Best thing I ever figured out. Yeah. Well, I mean, let me just give you props for that, because what I didn't know all those years was that underneath my craving for sugar was a genuine, authentic craving for fruit.
Yeah.
Right. And fruit did not have to be demonized the way that it was demonized in my life. And geez, I mean, rather than having pastries and Pop-Tarts, I could have been having bananas.
Yeah.
And it would have been so much healthier. So.
And isn't it amazing? And we'll get off this point here, but isn't it amazing how when you're fully nourished and you're eating foods that were designed for, and you get all your nutrition from your food, that it does reduce cravings a whole heck of a lot. It makes the whole plan so much easier.
Oh, and I think it's not only true for fruit and sugar, but it's like true for greens and salt.
100%.
Yeah.
110%. And I mean, that's how, the pleasure trap works, as they take those predominant flavors and those predominant nutrient needs, but, put them together in a intensified version without all the trace minerals and without really the vitamins and minerals in large amounts, just kind of the basic main flavors that we're driven to, right? And just give you that hit, but then you're craving, as you said, because you're not getting the nutrition you need.
Exactly. I think that's actually an important point, though, because part of overcoming overeating is accepting that there is authenticity to the craving. There's often a biological authenticity. Most people binge when they're really hungry.
Yeah.
And they've allowed themselves to get too hungry by restricting too much. Mm-hmm. And so it's one thing to say, well, I'll never have chocolate on a weekday again. But what are you authentically, not emotionally, but biologically craving that you could fulfill? Yeah. And you can look for specific combinations that fulfill the urge. Yeah. Now, before I was a raw vegan fruitarian guy, I don't know if it's appropriate to describe myself as a fruitarian because I have a lot of greens and a couple.
I usually use frugivorous myself.
Okay.
or frugivore?
Okay. I'm definitely a frugivore. Before I was doing that, and I've not been perfect, Chris, all this time.
Well,
I got to tell you.
perfect to dance.
But it's an immovable bullseye for me. It's the best way that I found of eating. On your show, I can show this. I can't show this elsewhere, but I have a tattoo that says, can you read that?
Oh, sick. Yeah, heck yeah, that's awesome. I never knew you had that.
But I didn't have it when I did the last interview with you.
I believe it.
Yeah.
I believe it.
It just kind of represents a commitment. I don't have a lot of tattoos for people that are worried that this reputable doctor is full of tattoos or something like that. But
yeah, well, I definitely am, right? And I this is my raw vegan one, the banana.
Oh, what do you know? Oh, that's cool.
Banana mustache.
Yeah. I think about it sometimes. I want to get some grapes and some bananas. And so some people ask me.
Have you tried that smoothie, by the way? I know we're a little off course, but have you tried a banana grape smoothie before?
No. Bananas and grapes together?
Fantastic. Fill the bottom half with grapes and then
Okay.
the top half with bananas, and tell me about how much you love it.
Dude, I'm so in. I am so in.
Yeah.
I'm gonna I'll go get some grapes tomorrow. That's fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah, I actually decided not to finish the banana cleanse because I've always eaten a lot of bananas, but it was upsetting my stomach. I didn't realize, because I do a lot of exercise and actually lose weight on like 35 bananas a day. And well, maybe 30, but I didn't realize having 30 bananas was going to upset my stomach the way that they're all pretty ripe, but I don't think I have enough amylase to do a full.
Overdid it a bit. I mean, you're a big guy too. You're what, 6'3" or 4"?
I'm 6'4".
6'4", yeah. I mean, the way I look at it, I think simplifying and mono eating is really, really good and beneficial in many ways. But if all of a sudden it starts to bring up symptoms or you start to not enjoy it, it's time to switch it. It's like,
Yeah.
sometimes convenience gets in the way of what our physiology really wants.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. But so I think that you can look for specific combinations that fulfill the craving. When I say fulfill the craving, it's not going to get you high with the food. For example, a chocolate bar. It's not going to get you high with food the way that the chocolate bar would. But if I have banana, kale juice, and celery smoothie, then the chocolate craving is gone.
Yeah.
No, I don't get chocolate cravings anymore. It's been 5 years since I've had a bite.
Yeah.
Almost 5 years. I think it's 5 years in August.
That's awesome.
Yeah. But in the beginning, when I was feeling tortured, that was a really good thing. Before I was raw vegan, or I was even trying to be raw vegan, and I would crave, pasta and mozzarella cheese and tomato sauce and oil, I would try substituting that with brown rice and nutritional yeast and crushed tomatoes.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't get me high the way the pasta and mozzarella cheese, but it would kill the craving. And so it's that type of experimentation. Now I experiment with raw vegan options. If I'm craving salt, sometimes some sun-dried tomatoes. If I'm for definitely greens, chopped up celery in my smoothies. It makes all the difference in the world. But I think that we need to look for the authentic biological need underneath the craving. Not just
interesting with that. It brings something up to me too. Would you say, because I mean, obviously there's a biological craving for nutrition, right? So when you fulfill that, then that craving is offset. I often talk about volume as well. And I mean, obviously when you're eating fruits and veg, you're talking about eating 30, 35 bananas some days. And when you put greens on top of that, that's a big pile. Do you think that's a big component is, again, about binging and people just shoveling food in because they're looking for that natural volume, but they're eating foods that don't have the volume. So they're just overeating and causing a whole host of issues.
So do I think that there is a satiety signal associated with volume? I do.
Yeah.
I do. And I think that our stomachs have shrunk because if we're designed to have fruit and leafy greens, then we should be eating a much higher volume than we can eat in hamburgers and pizza, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that there's probably an evolutionary craving for that volume that's not being met by the concentrated foods, even though the calories are there. And the nutrition is not really there in hamburgers and pizza, right? So you can have 3,000 calories of largely empty calories, and then your body still wants the nutrition, so it continues to crave. So I think that's part of it also. But you're the nutritionist. I'm just a guy who works with binge eaters.
Yeah. Well, I think you know a heck of a lot. And we've talked a lot, and I mean, you've spent a lot of time with Dr. Doug Graham, author of the 10-10 diet. I mean, you soak stuff up, especially over 5 years of living this lifestyle. You know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, so beyond that, what are some other things that you feel really makes your program and Never Binge Again different from the standard approach of, you know, trying to let go of emotional eating? And I know we went into that a little bit, but some standout things and maybe some tips around you know, how to apply that to help people.
I think that there are several mythologies in the culture that we stand up against. People believe that guidelines are better than rules. Like you shouldn't have hard and fast rules. It's better to say that I'll eat well 90% of the time and indulge 10% of the time.
Good old cheat day.
Good old cheat day, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'm not arguing that you should never have more indulgent things, because some people really like to do that. What I'm arguing for is specificity and bright lines. So the problem with the ambiguity of when are you on the 90% and when are you on the 10% is that every time you're in front of a chocolate bar, to stay with my nemesis, you have to make another decision, and decisions wear you down. They wear down your willpower, and you can only make so many good decisions a day. Whereas for example, if I wanted to have chocolate 10% of the time, I would say, I only ever eat chocolate the last 3 days of the calendar month. That's 10% of the time, but all my decisions are made and I don't have to think about it. That's why I think that rules are better than guidelines in most cases. You can have guidelines too for areas that don't really trouble you that much. Like I have a guideline on my food plan that says I buy organic food whenever possible. Whenever possible is not very clearly defined. It's not a bright line. And honestly, Chris, I'm not binging on conventional lettuce.
No, that's the difference, right? I think that's one of the big differences, because if you take something like chocolate, for example, and you say once in a while, you're more prone to be thinking about that a lot and gearing your day up to meet that eventual little treat. Whereas conventional food is, you're not going to be thinking about it all day. It's more going to be in the moment. Okay, well, I'll make this because that's all that's available right now. And it's a sacrifice rather than something that you're looking forward to as a cheat, right?
Exactly.
I mean, there's got to be some crazy psychology between that too. Those things that we want on some level, but we push aside, like we resist them, that seems to make it even more powerful. Like it seemed to me having a conditional on something that is you're really drawn to and you have a hard time binging with, psychologically would be really challenging, almost make it harder than having a steadfast rule. Would you say that's similar? Or?
There's several components of what you say. Could you ask the question again, maybe a slightly different way?
Yeah, I'm wondering, I mean, it seems to me that those things that you really resist seem to come up more and more and are really challenging in a way that, like, if you're resisting it with a part-time rule, like I can have that sometimes. It seems to me that would be in your face way more than if you just say, you know what? No, I don't do that. That would be a more
Okay. So there are two different types of people. There are people for whom never is a lot easier than sometimes.
Yeah.
For example, I tried 6 ways to Sunday or 42 ways to Sunday to try to find rules that would allow me to have chocolate sometimes.
Yeah.
In the end, I had to say I'm never going to have chocolate again and just become a person who doesn't eat chocolate. It's a lot easier to become a person who doesn't eat chocolate than to say I'm never going to have it again.
Yeah.
Although that's part of the path of how you get there. So there are people like me who can't do that. But then there are people for whom chocolate was trouble.
Yeah.
Because they never really defined the parameters for themselves about how much and when.
Yeah.
And I find about 2/3 of my clients are capable of defining how much and when and doing well with it and feeling satisfied. And about 1/3 are like me who have to say never. And it's different for different substances. So, some people could have a bag of Doritos once a week. And they couldn't have a bar of chocolate once a week. Some people can have 2 pieces of bread when they go out to dinner, but they couldn't have cheese, right? So you kind of have to assess that on an individual basis. I mean, I don't really think those things are food. We didn't have chocolate bars or Doritos or bread on the savannah, right?
Yeah.
So I've come to believe that those things are not actually food for me, but that's, you and I know that most people would view that as very extreme. And my program is diet agnostic, so I help people on whatever philosophy they want to. And when you compare it to binge eating, like, take someone who's having a couple of slices of bread at a restaurant on the weekend as compared to binge eating all week, you're talking about maybe having 50,000 calories less over the course of the week, and having a very sane, healthier lifestyle. So I've come to accept that we're not going to win over everyone to the raw advantage.
No, of course, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So I think that part of the problem is a lack of specificity and the requirement to make a decision. So if you just show up at a restaurant and say, I'm going to eat healthy, well, what specifically does that mean? What are you going to do for dinner? What are you going to do for dessert? What are you going to do for the salad? But if you think it through beforehand and you go to the restaurant menu online and you look up and figure out what dish you're going to have and maybe even enter it into a tracker before you go, then your decisions are made, and it's much easier when you get to that moment of temptation, because everything in a restaurant is set up to seduce your pig.
Yeah.
The lighting, the social forces, the way that the waiter presents the dessert tray, the way he describes the specials, the smells. So I think that the lack of specificity for 2/3 of the people is what's causing the problem. And then for 1/3 of the people, sugar, flour, alcohol are things that, better off let go of.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it sounds to me, it's like the pig in the reptilian mind is an irrational kind of irrational mind, and we're bringing rationality to it, actually bringing structure and looking at it pragmatically in a way like, okay, well, that's there for a reason, but it's not what I have to listen to, and creating more structure and rational thought around it. So.
And recognizing that it's making a biological error.
Yeah.
That it feels like your survival depends upon it. That's why everything goes out the window. That's where you get
the coping mechanism, right? It's at the end of the day, it's a coping mechanism that ensured our survival at a certain time.
Yep.
But it's not really applicable in today's day and age. It's like the flight and flight. But
all of those fat cats in white suits with mustaches figured out they could target it.
Yeah.
Figured out they could divert it for their best interests.
Yeah.
And that's why we feel like we need that bag of potato chips.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody needs a bag of potato chips. There's no doctor out there diagnosing a potato chip deficiency.
No.
Right.
No.
So, yeah. I forgot what question you asked. What?
A potato chip a day. I wouldn't want to live that life myself. And I kind of do the same thing in a way that, sometimes my old favorites, when I smell them, the smell brings up some thoughts and some binging kind of thoughts, and after a while for me, I just started to look at them as like air fresheners. Like, it's a pleasant scent, but it's not something I eat, and then that just slowly kind of went away.
I look at chocolate bars now as a big bag of chemicals.
Yeah.
I have intellectual memories of feeling like it had power over me.
Yeah.
I remember not being able to drive by the supermarket that had my favorite one without going to get some.
Mm-hmm.
But it completely lost all power over me.
Yeah.
And I think another good point is that we tend to stop craving things that we know we're never going to do.
Yeah.
It's like a prisoner given a life sentence. They don't want hope.
Mm-hmm.
It's a waste of energy. And your brain is set up to be very efficient. And so, first of all, the specificity in the rules eliminates the food obsession over time.
Yeah.
Because it's like, if your kid really knows, your toddler really knows that they're not getting candy in the store when you walk through the store, they're eventually going to stop asking.
Yeah.
But if once in a while what they beg for works, they're going to come up with more creative ways to keep begging for it. And that's how your thinking works. So if you're tortured by the mental obsession with food and you'd like to be more present and coherent for your relationships in your life, then think through all of the trouble spots, make very specific rules about when you're going to have it, when you're not going to have it. Teach yourself to recognize all of the squeals that I tell people to carry around a little piece of paper. And when their pig squeals for something that's over the line, whatever the line is, take a breath, take yourself out of that emergency response.
Yeah.
Write down what the squeal is, write down why it's wrong.
Yeah.
Writing is an upper brain activity. Logical reason is an upper brain activity. Breathing deeply and relaxing is an upper brain activity. The survival drive, I think it's the sympathetic nervous system, gets us all revved up for emergencies.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening when you have a case of the efforts. So you can do these things to slow yourself down and teach yourself to follow your rules. And you,
Awesome.
Chris, you can start with one simple rule.
Yeah.
People try to put their whole food life together, but start with one simple thing. Like,
Yeah.
I'll never
The
eat
biggest
standing,
problem, right? Maybe the biggest problem or something that always comes up.
I'll never eat standing up again.
Yeah.
I'll always put my fork down between bites.
Mhm.
I never go to sleep without writing down a hypothetical food plan for the next day.
Yeah.
But whatever one thing would make the biggest difference for the least effort, and get the ship moving in the right direction. See how this game is played. Start to restore your sense of hope and enthusiasm, and then you can adjust from there. Adjust for weight loss from there.
And it only snowballs, and it's like, I think it's really awesome too, because it's one of those things where in the beginning it's challenging because as we talked about, it's a rut. It's something that we're used to. It's a habit that is already ingrained, so we're easy to slide into it. But as soon as you create that rule and you take that space, you create that space with the breath and going into the higher centers of the brain, that becomes a new route. And the more you do it, all of a sudden it becomes automatic because
you're digging a new groove.
You're digging a new groove, and it actually gives you much more of what you're looking for. It creates that space to come into consciousness, which ultimately is going to lead you to where you want to go if you're paying attention. So
yes,
avoiding the pain and the long-term struggle and strife, right? So, I mean, for people that maybe they feel like they've lost hope and they've done this again and again, they've been on multiple diets. What is a really key tip you think that really can help them to just understand that, to be able to let it go and try again, to try something new? Because maybe they just think, oh, this is something gimmicky and different, but to give it another shot and really put that time in.
We have proof. We keep very careful results in our coaching program, for example, and we know that how does this work? The majority of, I have to phrase the data the right way so I'm not misleading people. If people engage in the program, which means emailing their coach at least every other day and doing some of the tasks, that we have a 91% reduction in binge frequency by the end of the first month. So
wow.
I can tell you just from the data that it works, and the majority of people who take the program, they do that.
Yeah.
So I have proof that it works, but more importantly, you need to understand that the thought that you never did, so you never can, is a pig squeal.
Yeah.
It's like your pig is saying, you've been on this highway for 1,000 miles and you haven't taken any of the exits. Therefore, you can't take the next one.
Yeah.
Right? No matter how long you're on the highway, there's an exit coming up and you can take it.
Yeah.
If you're sailing the ocean 90% of the way to London from New York, you can still turn that ship around.
Yeah.
Right? If there's nothing that's going to stop you from turning that ship around, you might have a long road to go, but it's hard to lose 100 pounds, but it's pretty easy to lose 1 pound 100 times.
Yeah.
And the fact that the pig tells you that you're pathetic for thinking about trying again, well, anybody that's really been successful at anything significant failed several times along the way.
Yeah.
And that's why there are these proverbs that say, fall down 7 times, get up 8.
Mm-hmm.
The pig is actually complimenting you and telling you that you've got fortitude and persistence. And that's what you need to succeed, is fortitude and persistence. So the last thing I would tell you is that negative voice and all that doubt and uncertainty is actually the pig itself. It's trying to get you to feel too weak to resist the next binge. So the doubt and uncertainty itself is binge motivated.
Yeah.
That's a piercing insight for most people.
Yeah.
And when they can make a decision to purge that doubt and uncertainty into the pig, into the concept of the pig, and say, Well, I'm 100% certain that I'm going to hit the bullseye. They're getting up and aiming for the bullseye, and just like any Olympic archer who's aiming at the bullseye, they don't let doubt and uncertainty distract them. They become one with the bullseye. They commit to the bullseye with perfection, and all this doubt and uncertainty is not a part of them. Now, if they miss the bullseye, then they forgive themselves with dignity, and they go through a process of assessing what went wrong and how do they aim once again. So I tell them that it's a process of committing with perfection, but forgiving yourself with dignity. And that's how Never Binge Again works.
That's awesome, man. I absolutely love it. Couldn't agree more. And I'm really happy that you went through that process yourself, and picked yourself up and figured it out and are shining example here, and have created this book and programs. And I know you also have coaching, so you can not only coach people with Never Binge Again, but coach people to become coaches for Never Binge Again.
We do. Yeah.
Which is amazing. So you're helping thousands and thousands of people. I know your book's like a bestseller on Amazon and spreading around, changing a lot of people's views and waking people up to the realities of binge eating and how to make it a lot easier for themselves. So before we go into some of that, and I want you to go a little bit more into where people can find you and some of your resources and stuff that I just mentioned, but a little bit more detail. Is there anything else that you really want to kind of leave people with? I know we're getting to the top of the hour here, so is there anything else you want to really leave people with or might be really helpful that we haven't gone over?
I like Jim Rohn's quote, which is that a life of discipline is better than a life of regret. I think freedom sits on top of discipline.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for the discipline of the engineers who put together your car, your steering wheel wouldn't turn the wheel 30 degrees to the right when you turn exactly 30 degrees to the right.
Yeah.
Which means you couldn't get around the city as well as you can. I was a jazz pianist in my youth, and if it wasn't for the discipline I put into practicing the scales, I couldn't improvise and express my soul the way that I really need to express myself. So I think a life of discipline is better than a life of regret. And this can be a lot simpler than it's made out to be. You don't have to figure out all of your childhood problems. You don't have to develop all these emotional coping mechanisms. You need to recognize that binging is a bad habit, that binging actually reinforces emotional stress. It doesn't really help you cope with stress. And that there are some very practical things you can do to stop binge eating that are a lot simpler if you can clear away the muck and focus on them. So that's what I'd like to leave people with.
That's awesome, man. And I'd even say it could go hand in hand, right? I mean, once you clear this and you let go of binging, some of the traumas and emotional stuff might be easier to clear in the first place.
Oh, yeah. Ask any therapist. They would rather have someone who's not binge eating. If you keep binging, you might never deal with your emotional struggles.
Exactly. It's just sidestepping forever, right?
Yeah.
And compounding the issue. So, I mean, it all plays back to how important it is to be able to never binge again, and or like you said, it's a process.
We're using the word never in a funky way also.
Yeah.
It's like the way I talk to my 2-year-old niece. I say you can never cross the street without holding my hand. I know when she gets older, I'll teach her how to do it, right? She's 16 now, so it's already happened. But our pigs are like 2-year-olds, so we present the rules to them as if they're set in stone. But you can change them with forethought and intellectual consideration and a pause to make sure. Because I'm going to have to go in just a minute because I'm supposed to be on a... Yeah.
Well, if you could just, we'll wrap this up then. If you could let people know where to find you and the 3 main resources you want to point people towards.
Okay. It's all at neverbingeagain.com. I'd like you to click the big red button.
Yep.
And when you do that and sign up for the reader bonus list, first of all, you'll get a copy of the book in Kindle, Nook, or PDF format. That's free. If you want the paperback or the Audible format, there's a charge for that, but it exists.
Yep.
You'll also get 2 important things. One is a set of pre-recorded coaching sessions so that you can hear what it's like to actually go through this on a practical basis, and how inspiring and enthusiasm restoring and anti-depressing it is to take people through that. Self-esteem enhancing is the right word. And the third thing is a set of food plan starter templates. We thought through sets of rules that people might use for any particular dietary philosophy. So whether you're a raw vegan like Chris and I, low-fat raw vegan, or you're a ketogenic person or a paleo person or a point counter or a calorie counter or a macrobiotic, or whatever you are, there's a set of rules you might consider. And so at neverbingeagain.com, click the big red button.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Glenn. Really appreciate you, your time. It's great to reconnect. It's been a little while. And
Been a while.
I'll also be including our previous interview and information below this so people can learn more, and all the links will be on my webpage. So I really encourage people to check you out and to get Never Binge Again and try it on and just grow with all of that. I think it's amazing. So thanks again, Glenn. Really appreciate you, man. Much love. See you guys.
Learn to never binge again. You've got the power. Ooh, don't forget to check out my raw recipes playlist in the top left, the video just for you in the top right, subscribe for more videos in the bottom right, and get your 3 free ebooks in the bottom left. Grab your free raw recipe app, available on iPhone and Android, with over 100 free raw recipes, common fruit and vegetable calorie breakdown, frickin' raw food combining chart, shopping cart function, and so much more.